Hi everyone, today we're going to talk about Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. I decided to do this for my legal update project when I had a teacher say, I have to follow IEPs, but 504 plans don't really matter. I didn't know I had to follow them. And I realized if this veteran teacher didn't understand any more about 504 plans than he was sharing with me, that probably there is a need for this kind of information for our general ed teachers. And that's why I decided to select this topic for my project. We're going to talk briefly about 504 history and why 504 matters. We're going to talk about what a 504 plan is and what a 504 plan isn't. We'll look at 4 case studies and we'll determine whether or not we should consider a 504 plan for the students in question. And then I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have. In a 2006 survey, which I realize is a bit dated, but I'm not sure the data would be different today, it showed that a lot of teachers really don't have an understanding, nor do they have training in Section 504 procedures. And 23% of the teachers in this survey did not feel that, or were the only ones who felt they had enough information to fulfill the mandates. And 69% said that they had never been trained. That's a huge number, a huge percentage of teachers who don't have any training in 504. And why 504 is so difficult. 504 is older and broader than the Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act. 504 came out of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, which was influenced heavily by the Civil Rights Movement and by civil rights legislation. The doctrine of separate but equal is inherently unequal led to some of the same ideas for people with disabilities in the workplace and education. And that led to Section 504, which really is a civil rights piece of legislation that protects people with disabilities from discrimination. It is less specific and has less specific procedures than IDEA. It's difficult because it's based on protecting civil rights, not on special education. It is not funded, and that may be one reason why there has been so little training for Section 504. Teachers often don't realize that 504 is for general education students. In teaching, a lot of the time we get used to kicking the can down the road, and we don't realize sometimes that our accommodations have to happen in our own classrooms, and we have to work with our students to help them be successful. And a lack of follow-through for 504s equals discrimination. And I think that that's a very terrifying idea for school districts. So what is Section 504 of the 1973 Rehabilitation Act? It's a federal law to protect people with disabilities in programs and activities that get financial assistance from the U.S. Department of Education. Children who qualify are guaranteed FAPE, a free and appropriate public education. Just like special education students, they are guaranteed to the right type of placement and accommodations to make them successful in the classroom. It's not utilized to address conditions not covered by IDEA as often as it probably could or should be. And so a lot of times when we go down the road of having someone evaluated for special education, we don't necessarily follow up with Section 504 plans if they don't qualify for special education. And educators, again, often feel untrained to use 504s, much less suggest them and implement them. The purpose of 504 is very simple. It forbids discrimination against students with disabilities by schools which receive federal dollars. This is a diagram that shows what our students look like. All of our students are in the blue. So all of our students are special students, our 504s, our students who have impairments but no plans. Those are all within the students in the district. We are looking all the time for 504 students to have the least restrictive environment, and we want them to have the most time in general education. And so you can see that we have our general education students. Those are the students who function without any special plans or accommodations. Our students with impairments are students who may not have any type of plan, but need some sort of modification or accommodation to be successful in the classroom. We generally identify these students through the child study team approach. Our 504 students have an impairment which substantially limits their access to education. And then below that, we have in a very small bubble our students who actually are eligible for special education services under IDEA. And we see that the IDEA is the most restrictive, and we're always going to try to get our students, regardless of what their label is, into the least restrictive environment in general education classrooms. A student with a disability is one who has a physical or mental impairment that limits one or more major life activity. Somebody who has in the past had this particular impairment, for example, someone who has previously received special education services and has had an IEP, could be such a student. And it could be a student who is regarded, somebody that we have a question about whether or not they have an impairment. Section 504 substantially limits a life activity, and here we have some of the life activities that could be limited. Notice that learning is highlighted because that's one that we see very often in our Section 504 plans and in our qualifications. A substantial limitation means that the student is unable to do something that an average student of the same age can do, except that our student is restricted by the condition and can't do the same things. Students have to be otherwise qualified. The student meets all of the criteria for age and intellect to be a participant, but the disabling condition gets in the way from that happening. Section 504 states that no otherwise qualified individual with a disability shall be, because of his disability, excluded from the participation, the benefits of, or subjected to discrimination from any program that receives federal financial aid. So some of the conditions that may qualify for Section 504. ADD or ADHD is a really hard standard to meet, a high standard to meet for special education. And so students who don't qualify under IDEA could possibly have a Section 504 plan to deal with that. Chronic medical conditions, heart problems, cancer, hemophilia, those are chronic medical conditions that would be difficult for students in the school situation. Communicable diseases include HIV and AIDS, drug and alcohol addiction. Physical impairments could be students who have arthritis or cerebral palsy. They don't have anything cognitively that they are struggling with, but they have a physical impairment. Some impairments can be temporary, such as pregnancy, broken bones, an extended illness, and emotional disorders. Anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, and eating disorders could fall under those categories. There are many ways that we may have a referral initiated, but probably the most significant initiation we have would be a school teacher or a parent who had academic concerns, dropout concerns, truancy concerns, and students who are found ineligible for special education. Those are probably where we get the two greatest number of referrals. School districts must do a child find study just like they do for special education under IDEA. The school district should be working to identify students with disabilities. They should notify parents and students. They should provide policy and procedure. They should get consent so that they can evaluate using multiple measures what is going on with the student. They need to create and implement a plan, and then they need to periodically review that plan, generally at least once a year.